Welcome to the DevCommunity Summit 2021. Today, my talk will be about the new recommended jetpack register for activity result API. But first, I'm going to start by introducing myself. As you can see, I am an Android Engineer 3 at Stream Frontdoor, founder of Budgeting Buddy, a current student at Summer Gene. I volunteer for Also Women Who Code Mobile, very amazing group. Please join us. And I'm also a Women Tech Maker ambassador. So what is it? What is register for activity result? So as you can see through my little bullets up there, it took me a bit of time to wrap my head around this new API. But I can say it's pretty sleek, especially when used from the consuming app side. And what a better way to pass data between activities. If you've been building an Android application, you have indeed used start activity for result in one way or the other. Also, start activity for result now has been deprecated, hence the new API. You wonder why. So I can go through a bit of the whys. So when you start an activity for result, and in this case, an app that has, let's say, high memory intensive operation, such as camera usage, and it's almost certain that your process and your activity will or might be destroyed due to low memory. For this reason, the activity result API decouples the result callback from the place in your code where you launch the other activity. This is because the result callback needs to be available when your process and activities are recreated. Furthermore, the callback must be unconditionally registered every time your activity is created, even if the logic of launching the other activities happens based on user or other business logic. Going through a little slide here. And as you can see in my little slide, I have a picture of how the deprecated versions look like. And you can see here is a sample of how we did things before. And as we know, passing data and getting responses between new activities are the most common things we do during the development phase. Currently, the only way to get a response back from the next activity is through passing an intent and request data through start activity for result. After that, we have to check request and result code before parsing responses on the activity result. Maybe some of you agree that when the app grows, there will be a lot of nested if, and the code will be tightly coupled and more difficult to test if you're a testing fan. I'm a testing fan. Now enters the new way. So I have read concerns from a past post about the new way being unnecessarily complicated compared to the old way, the previous slide that I showed. However, what I think, and this is my opinion, it removes the hassle of maintaining request codes and adds testing ability, like I mentioned in my previous slide. I do, however, think its main problem is reusability. For instance, again, in my opinion, activity results callback should be part of activity result launcher, which we'll talk about later, so that we can reuse it for other purposes. For example, if I needed to check storage permissions for multiple action, I could use a single activity result contract .request permission for all of them. Now, as you've seen here, advantages. It reduces the complexity we face when calling an activity from a fragment or from another activity. Two, it's easily ask for any permission and get callback. And we all know many apps use permissions and need permissions. A question I often see is, what if someone wants to pass intent and request codes as parameters, like on the deprecated method for some reason? And after digging into it, because I'm still learning about this new API, my answer would be, there's no need to pass a request code because you can simply create that launch object for individual calling. So if you want to call two different activities, then you need to create the callback. If you want to use it on your application, you start by adding the dependencies, and those are the dependencies. And in the next slide, I'll show you how I've used this on my simple application budgeting buddy that I use to play with, which helps me learn a lot about the new technologies and everything happening in the Android world. Bam, there it is. Enter just activity for result. As you can see, I have this particular class called post budget contract and activity result launcher, which has an integer and a string. And as you see, we override the create intent. And you see what I put extra as, which is the budgeting buddy ID and my post ID. And I do also override the past result. First, you create a contract by extending an abstract class called activity result launcher, which takes in a type of input and output. And then you only need to override two methods, that is the create intent and pass intent. This is a sample of how I'm doing it on budgeting buddy again. Then in my activity, that is my main activity, as you can see on my on create, as you can see my little arrow, in my activity, I created a private file, which I called register for activity results, and I did something with the result. And that's a simple example there. Now enter the main purpose. We have the permission request. During my reading, I learned that handling of multiple permission is easier with this new API because we are provided with request permission and request multiple permission contracts. This is an example of how request permission contract looks like. So we have a private var request permission, and as you can see, if the permission is granted, do something else, but the other thing that you'd like to display. An example of request multiple permission contract. As you can see here, I have my request multiple permission, which has register activity for result, and inside it has the contract that we're provided with, and with the particular method, request multiple permissions. And then you can use this where you want. Also, you can call your var request multiple permission and set an on-click listener using the var launch, the array of permission like access find location, Bluetooth, and many more. And that will lead me to my next slide, which shows up how actually permission a slide that illustrates the workflow and the set of decision associated with this process. That is, as you can see how we do the permission, it's not easy. So developers often forget about these nuances when dealing with runtime permission. Like one, if a user has previously rejected our request, it is advisable to further explain why the application needs these permissions. When rejecting a permission request, C8b, we should limit the functionality of the application and consider the case when the user has checked the don't ask again option. I remember working on this on our application at work. It was pretty interesting. This is where the show request permission rationale method comes to our rescue. If the method returns true before requesting permission, we should tell the user how the application will use these permissions. If the permission is not granted and should show request permission rationale returns false, it means that the don't ask me again option was selected, and we should ask the users to go into the settings and grant permission manually. So because you don't want your users to not be able to grant the permission, especially for us, our company, we use a lot of calling and audio. So we need to be able to see your camera and the audio for the application to work. And if somebody turns off the don't ask again permission, it means the application will not work. So we have to keep insisting to the users like, hey, you need to go here and update those permission there. Here is a yes. So as you can see, we have multiple permission that's set on click listener, and then we have a request multiple permission dot launch and the array of set of permissions. Okay, here now we're going to talk about requesting an activity in a separate class, which is pretty important. This is something that I've done too at work. I will speak of this use case because I used it recently on our SDK. In our company, we built an SDK that is used by other developers, which is pretty cool. Well, the component activity and fragment classes implement the activity result caller interface to allow you to use the register for activity result API. You can also receive the activity result in a separate class that does not implement the activity result caller by using activity results registry directly. For example, you might want to implement a lifecycle observer that handles registering a contract along with launching the launcher. It is also important to note when using the activity result registry API, it is strongly recommended to use the APIs that take a lifecycle owner because the lifecycle owner automatically removes your registered launcher when the lifecycle is destroyed. However, in a case where a lifecycle owner is not available, each activity result launcher class allows you to manually call and register as an alternative, which I thought was a pretty smart move. And the part I said about testing, let's look at how you would test this. So here I have a sample testing, and as you can see, we're using the HILT in this particular testing. This is where I created a fake registry model, and in the fragment show how I'm getting the fake registry model. By default, register for activity automatically uses activity result registry provided by the activity. It also provides an overload that allows you to pass in your own instance of activity registry. That can be used to test your activity result calls without actually launching another activity. So since we have a sample app that we use to test our SDK and we use HELT for dependency injection, I tried to check how I can actually test this. And again, that's the sample. And as you can see inside the code where I can pinpoint on it, let me see if I cannot pinpoint on that, but you can see where I start my class fake registry, which extends an activity result registry, and then I have val expected result start from that particular activity, and then it overrides a func which takes a type of input and output again, and then on launch we have a request code, the contract, and then the input, and then as you can see I return a dispatch which takes in the request code and expected results. Summary. Do not call register activity for result inside the if and when statement. Check resolve activity before calling the launch and register your contracts if you're going to be using it. So here we're going to let's highlight a few non-obvious points that must be taken into account. Contracts can be registered at any point of the activity or fragment lifecycle, but they cannot be launched before going through the created state. A common approach is to register contract as class fields. It is not recommended to call register activity inside the if and when statement because the reason is that while expecting the result, let me scroll down a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing a bit and then share because I want to be able to pinpoint a particular part and escape that. Just 1 minute. And then I'm going to share again. Thank you, everybody. There we go. And then I'm going to make this full screen. There we go. And then go to my slide. Okay, next one. And this is, I think, where we are right here. So again, let me go through the summary. So the summary is, do not call register for activity result inside the if and when statement. Check resolve activity before calling the launch. Register your contract. And the reason as to why I want to mention that let's highlight a few non-obvious points that must be taken into account. Contracts can be registered at any point of the activity or the fragment lifecycle, but they cannot be launched before going to the created state. A common approach is to register the contract at the class field. It is not recommended to call register for activity result inside the if and when statement. The reason is that while expecting the result, the application process can be destroyed by the system. For example, when launching a very heavy camera app, like our application is very camera heavy because we rely on camera to fragment and AR stuff. So that's one of the reasons. And if we don't re-register the contract when restoring the process, the result will definitely be lost. If we start an implicit intent and the operating system is not able to find a suitable activity, an exception, activity not found, will be thrown, which is no activity was found to handle the intent. So to avoid this situation, you need to check resolve activity with the package manager before calling the launch, or in the get synchronous result method. And yay. So finally, the new activity result API offers an easier way to do a lot of common tasks, especially request permission, take pictures. And so we don't need to rely on any other third-party libraries anymore. Besides that, it also simplifies the old implementation that might make the code loosely coupled. And this makes the code loose coupling, improves reusability, and it's easier to test. And thank you very much. I did attach some of the resources here, which is the Android docs and this amazing Stack Overflow question that has pretty detailed information about how you can use and how you can learn from it. So I will share the slides after this. Thank you very much. If we have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. See if we.
Yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, please feel to use the Zoom chat feature.
I know my talk was pretty later. I attended some of the other amazing talks, even though I couldn't make to others because I had another event going on, which is awesome too. Thank you, Craig. Any questions?
Yeah, I think we don't have any questions, Madona, but yeah, thanks for going through the new register API. So yeah, so we look forward to see you again in the next Dev community, and feel free to hop onto the next closing remarks meeting, and probably you can win some cool swag. So yeah, please join us for the closing remarks, and we look forward to see you in the next season or the next year. Yep. So thank you. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thanks.